okay, I'm all right where I am.
It's just a delight to have you here in the flesh. We're used to reading your pearls of wisdom, and now we get to
Hold the pearls.
hear them in person and ask questions about them. So we're looking forward to this. It'll be great.
Someone once said, and this is again back a long time ago, they said that the term spiritual experience is a little bit of a misnomer, because spirituality really is knowledge of the transcendent. That's the ultimate spirit that enlivens all of the material, all of the manifest creation. And that's not an experience. I mean, it is an experience. We transcend it, we experience it, but it's not experience in the sense that there's a subject and an object. Object of experience, not the kind of experience that we have, that we ordinarily understand from the waking state of consciousness. Even experiences, subtle experiences, and that's it. Even experience on the subtle levels, they're just experiences of something outside yourself. Really, what we need to do is, like he always said, capture the four. We need to, if we want to have all these wonderful experiences, we really need to experience the transcendent, which means we need to have our mind expand beyond the boundaries of whatever boundaries we have, all the boundaries of our individuality. So the experience of the transcendent is not the experience of this chair, or even the experience or pure consciousness, depending on how flat or lively it is. I think that's really that's really what Jewish ritual practice is supposed to create in us. It is the experience of the transcendent. And it uses various modalities to accomplish that. There is such a thing as meditation in Jewish tradition. How and to what extent we even know what those meditative techniques are, or if there are some few people, hidden away somewhere who still practice, the original techniques, I have no idea. I'm told that there are all sorts of people who come up with different kinds of meditations, what they call Jewish meditations. I have no idea how valid those practices are, or what kind of experiences they bring. But so it could be that there are explicit meditative practices that go way, way back to Moses, let's say. Maybe he got it at Mount Sinai, and they've been passed down. But unfortunately, our esoteric tradition has as part of it that it's only taught to very few people. And so, if Judaism doesn't have anyone who has done that yet, it's perhaps not surprising. In any event, but we do have other techniques, and I'd say probably the most central one, because it's something that's done all the time, every day, and not just 3 times a day, but all the time, is prayer. Prayer is, someone once, a former student of mine who went to Israel and has lived in Israel since about 1980. He once said, TM is like the telephone system. TM makes the connection with the divine. He said, but it doesn't tell you what to say. He said, Jewish prayer tells you what to say. So that, I think, is true. Certain aspects of Jewish prayer are quite formulaic. I mean, there's certain things that you say, and you say them in a certain way, and those those words were composed by people on a very high spiritual level to be used by all of us on whatever spiritual level we're at, and if they're used properly, then they will elevate our spiritual level. In particular, the Shemona Esrei that we have, the Midah that we have, was composed by the men of the Great Assembly at the beginning of the Second Temple period, so that was around 500 before the Common Era, right around the time of Shankara. And there are quite a number of prophets among those that group, and so they put together the Shemona Esrei in such a way that when we say it, we actually connect to the various different impulses of intelligence that go to make up the world, and we enliven them in ourselves, and we enliven them in creation, especially when we daven with a minyan, which when we're done, we should do. I'd like to do Tzarnas Kaddish. And we get the support of a group practice, then that enlivenment is even more. Now, there's a general question in Jewish practice. When you're doing a mitzvah, the question is, do you need to have intentionality? It's called kavanah. Kavanah actually means direction or focus, but in this case it means intentionality. For example, if you're at the Seder and you have matzah, you have an olive bulb's worth of matzah, have you satisfied the requirement of eating matzah at the Seder, whether or not you have the intention to do so? And the answer for most mitzvahs is no. You don't really, as long as you do it, and as long as you have the awareness that you're doing it for the sake of the mitzvah, then you don't have to have a lot of intentionality. But prayer is different. Prayer does require intentionality, because otherwise you're just battling words. There's a story, one of the parts, like a feudal baron in not medieval, but 16th century, 17th century Poland. He has this bear, trained bear, and he has this Jewish steward. And every so often he sees the Jew. Takes off and goes to the corner. He has his prayer book, and he davens mincha. And so he goes to the Jew and he says, "I want you to teach my bear to pray." And the Jew says, "What are you talking about? He's a bear. He can't pray. Animals can't pray." He said, "Teach my bear to pray." So he's the parts. So the Jew gets a prayer book and he puts honey on the pages, and so he gives the book to the bear. And the bear, gets the honey and goes to the next page, gets the honey. And so he trains him this way. So he goes to the parts and he says, here's your bear, here's the prayer book, watch. So the bear takes the prayer book, he's going like that. And the part says, "What sort of garbage is this? The bear's just standing there turning pages." And the Jew says, "Sadly, if you go to most synagogues, you'll see a lot of people standing there just turning pages." Okay, that's not prayer. That doesn't do anything for you any more than it does less for you than getting the honey does for the bear. So it requires some intention. And the intention allows you to take the words that you're saying. So the words have meaning, and the words have sound, and the words also have a feeling behind them. Every one of the brachos that you say is a feeling. And when you focus on that, and that doesn't mean concentrating like getting a headache, although some people do that, and I guess they do get headaches. But if you keep your focus on that, then my experience anyway has been that you start to see subtler and subtler levels of that, and you start to connect it to your own experience on subtler and subtler levels. So it's almost like it's a kind of transcending. You settle down, and you have this sequence of blessings. Now the sequence of blessings in the Shemona Esrei is the first three blessings are blessings of praise. So the first thing, if you're going to make a request of someone, you first butter them up a little bit, so to speak. If you're going to request something of God, you first have to kind of come to the understanding of who God is, and that's the purpose of the first blessing. Blessing that God is the God of creation. God takes an interest in human beings. God is the source of holiness. God is the source of everything. And then there's a sequence of requests. This is in the daily Shemona Esrei. It's different on the Sabbath and holidays. So, and that series of requests is requests for what seem like mundane things, but really they're not. They're the things that sustain us in the relative, and what we come to understand is that the relative creation, our food, our health, the functioning of our body, all of that is connected deeply to the source. In other words, if we want help, we don't get, if we need to go to the doctor, we go to the doctor. But basically, the doctor doesn't heal us. What heals us is our connection with the transcendent. So we understand that. So each of these is like a different stream of manifestation bubbling up. And when we pray for our health or for someone else's health, it's like we follow that stream back to its source. Then the last three blessings are blessings of thanksgiving. So in other words, once we've asked God, it's like thanks in advance for providing me with everything I need. So that's one example. The other side of this is so we connect ourselves with the transcendent through these various practices. So that's one. The purpose of this is, and this, I think I promised this in the blurb, right? So now I'm going to redeem that promise. There's a purpose to connecting to the transcendent, and not just because we want to be healthy and we want to have enough to eat and all that kind of stuff, which we do. But the purpose of connecting to the transcendent is that when we connect to the transcendent, we bring the transcendent out first into our awareness, and then into our evaluation of the environment, and eventually we use that to structure the environment so it more perfectly reflects the value of the different values of the transcendent. Ramban, who was a 13th century he was probably the leading light of Jewish light of the 13th century. In his commentary, I think it's his commentary to Leviticus somewhere, he basically says, you know, there's a purpose to creation. God's purpose to creation was that we human beings, free will, you know, possessed of free will, should come to acknowledge God as the king, the sovereign, basically come to acknowledge God as everything there is. Which means we need to create a state of consciousness where we understand the nature of the transcendent as being all-pervasive, and that everything that we see is nothing other than the transcendent moving within itself. So that informs all the practices that we do. So when we pray, you know, we think we're dealing with these individual items, but in fact what we're doing is taking the transcendent and infusing it into all of these different items. And by that I mean we start to evaluate, oh yes, this food is, we first evaluate this food is from God, because I say a blessing right before I eat or drink. I'm going to say a blessing. Okay, thank you, God, for giving me this food, or for bringing bread from the earth. But eventually, the idea is not that there's God and there's us and there's the food. The idea is that there's God, and He's manifesting Himself as us and as the food, and integrating those two values in the same way that God Himself is completely integrated at the basis of creation. So that's kind of the purpose of the practice. And now you can evaluate everything that we do in those terms. What does it do what does this practice do to bring us to that state of consciousness? And all of our practices have as the one ultimate purpose to put our attention on the ultimate reality, which is God. So when we pray, obviously we're putting our attention on God and His manifestations and His interaction with us. But, you know, when we take a bite to eat, right, we say a bracha first. The rabbis say, if you don't say a bracha, it's stealing. You're stealing from God. If you don't have permission to use it, it's something in the world. God created the world. It's His world. He only gives us permission to use it when we say a bracha. So what's the purpose of the bracha? The purpose of the bracha is to create in our awareness the knowledge, the understanding that this food that we're about to eat, or this, and whatever action we're about to do, this is part of God. And what we're going to do when we perform this action is we're going to restructure the cosmos to more perfectly reflect the transcendental value from which it comes. So we say, "Hamotzi lechem min haaretz." You know, we can have, you know, first of all, it's a little, you know, God doesn't bring forth bread from the earth; He brings forth wheat from the earth, and He only does it if we put in a lot of effort. And even if it's mechanized, you know, I mean, go out to a farm, you know, they can have all the tractors and combines and stuff that they've got, and those guys work hard for a living. So there's that, and then the wheat has to be harvested, and it has to be ground, and then it has to be mixed with water and eggs and yeast and whatever else you're going to make your bread, and then kneaded, and then baked, and then, you know, so all of that is just the mechanism. It's the mechanism by which God brings forth bread from the earth. And by acknowledging that, it's like we take all of that stuff, and we roll it up, and we bring it back to its source. We take it back to its source. When we take a lulav, right, and we shake the lulav, you know how to shake a lulav? Forward, back, forward, right, back, left, up, down. Okay? The rabbis will tell you the symbolism is that God is in all 6 directions, right? That's just when we live in a 3-dimensional space. So the intentionality that we need to have. Now, when you take the lulav, actually as soon as you say the blessing, take the lulav bundle and the esrog in your hand, you've actually fulfilled the mitzvah. But the shaking is a way to kind of like shake yourself up a little bit, let's say, and once you get shaken up, then you can settle down, right? Otherwise, you kind of stuck. It's called a kneeling. It's called a kneeling. It's a way of actually solving differential equations on a computer. You get into a state, and then you randomly perturb it, which is like shaking it up, and then you let it kind of settle down. Just the way, if you want temperamental, you heat it up, and then you quench it, you cool it down. Anyway, so you shake the lulav, and it shakes you up a little bit, and you say, oh yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, God's everywhere. Okay? The fact that you've got the four species, I mean, that has its symbolism. One of the symbolisms is all different parts of your body. So lulav is the spine, the willow is the lips, because the leaves on the willow look like lips, and the myrtle, hatas, is like the eyes, the little leaves are like the eyes, and the esrog is like the heart. So it's all parts of your body have to be integrated together and harnessed to the service of the Creator, because that's what we're here for. What we're here for is to acknowledge the Creator, and not just intellectual acknowledgement. This is its real knowledge, acknowledgement, knowledge, based on direct experience. That all this is that, and that alone is, and what we're doing is participating in God's inner life. And when we have that intentionality, then we can participate in it more fully. So it's all a question of our intention. If we have our intention on all different scattered things, then our results are going to be kind of scattered. If we constantly are bringing our attention back to God, be it through brachas, or be it through Shema Esrei, be it through the actions that we take, be it through the foods that we eat. Every time I go to the grocery store, right, unless I'm not very creative when it comes to food, so I always get the same thing. But occasionally, I'll see something, I say, I wonder if that's any good. First thing I do is I pick up the container, whatever it is, and I look for a hechsher, right? Because I keep kosher, so I look for a hechsher. If it doesn't have a hechsher, it's back on the shelf. And that's a way of connecting with God. It's a very simple thing. I just always have in my awareness that there's some things I can eat and some things I can't eat.
Question. Is the general thinking in Judaism that we're looking to identify with God, merge with God, or is there always a separation? Is there always meant to be a separation?
Repeat the question.
So the question was...
For the
He's
camera.
not speaking. He's speaking louder than I am. So Mark's question was, is the, and I'll open up the questions now, because I think I probably said all I've got figured out so far. Is the idea to identify with God, or merge with God, or
Become?
Well,
or
we
have
can't-
separation.
You can't become God.
Or have
So what
separation.
kind of separation is there from God? Now, in Jewish thought, there can't be any idea of identifying with God. We have there's a commandment to cling to God, and the rabbis ask, well, how can you cling to God when God is like consuming fire? You know, God is infinite. How can you cling to the infinite? You can't cling to it. You can only, I guess, become infinite. You know, your mind can become infinite, but then you're not clinging to it. You just maybe clinging to God means cosmic consciousness, because then you're. I'm just thinking out loud now, because then your mind is infinite, right? So in that sense, it's merged with God, if you will, or it's clinging to God. It's got the same characteristic as God. But then there's all the rest of you.
Does that whole concept get addressed in Jewish literature?
Well, yeah, this idea of clinging.
The language is different.
The idea of clinging to God definitely does get addressed, and the answer to the question is, well, how can you cling to God? One is you cling to the sages, to the Torah scholars who embody that, embody the infinite the most. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is, the other thing that's discussed is to emulate God's attributes. God's attributes are the way he interacts with the world. So they say, just as God is merciful and compassionate, you should be merciful and compassionate, like that. So, but I think you probably have to go to the Zohar to get more clear descriptions of the experience of transcending and becoming infinite oneself.
Yeah, there are two terms in Kabbalah, Hisbodedus and Dvekus.
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 Dvekus means it's like from devek. Right? Glue devek is glue. So that's clinging to God.
But
Dvekus is
Hisbodedus as well?
What?
Hitbodedut is from badad, which means to be alone. So that's
It's like Kaivalya.
what?
Like Kaivalya,
What's that?
being alone.
Being alone, yeah. Yeah, one of my favorite verses in Torah is Ein Am Levadat Yishkom. It's a nation that dwells alone. It's from Bilam's. Bilam tried to curse the Jews, and God turned it into a blessing. Turned all the curses into blessings. But he said it's a nation that dwells alone, and we do. I mean, anytime we get too comfortable, we get in some place other than Israel, we get kicked out. Because we're not supposed to assimilate. We're not supposed to be like everybody else. We're supposed to be ourselves. We're supposed to maintain our own cultural integrity. We're supposed to, you can't be a light unto the nations if you just cut down the nations come up. Anyway, so hit bodedut, yeah, I think, it's a reflexive form. It's hit pa'el form. So it means it may have the Shai would have a better sense of it, but it has a sense of making yourself alone, going inward, I guess. But
Question from what you were talking about a few minutes ago about the prayer. And you said the meaning and the feeling, is there a prescribed feeling as we have?
no, it's not like you get when you go to TTC.
Right.
No,
There's no
and it changes. It changes as your experience.
Just repeat the question.
Yeah, so the question is there a prescribed, well, there's definitely a prescribed meaning, and there's definitely a prescribed sound, because there's certain words, and they have a pretty specific meaning. I mean, it's not, you know, it's not like Torah where you can read the same text 6 different ways, or 70 different ways, or 600,000 different ways, depending on who you're talking to. It's a pretty set text, but it does take on a different meaning as your experience changes. You know, when Marie was sick and, you know, really fading, a lot of the prayers took on, you know, all of a sudden took on a very, very personal meaning. And, you know, when she passed away and, you know, I was dealing with all that, you know, they took on a different meaning. And it's, and, you know, it's different for different people. And that's the beauty of it. You know, that's the beauty and the genius of the Anshe Knesset Haganova, the men of the Great Assembly who put that together. There are 120, and that's why the Israeli Parliament has 120 members. It explicitly set up that way. That's why it's called Knesset, from the Anshe Knesset Haganova. Anyway, but that's the genius. You know, it's the same prayers, the same words. There's a, you know, between you and me and you today and you tomorrow and, you know, you at Shachrit, you at Mincha, and you at, it's different. It's different because your experience is different because you're coming at it from a different place, but it all leads back to the same place. You know, leads us all back to the same place. So
Judaism 101. You know, I mean, what is expected is on a daily basis? Is it just for men? Is it, you know, there's certain things just for women? What is the basic expectation of what we're supposed to do?
Some of it depends on who we are, and some of it's the same for everybody. The whole day is really spent in prayer. You get up in the morning and you say, Modani. Thank you. You thank God for getting you up. Modani lefanecha, melech chayam, shechazarta bi'et nishmati l'chem haraba minotecha. I give thanks to you, ever-living King, who has returned my soul to me in His mercy. Great is your faithfulness. Now that's a very interesting line just there. Great is your faithfulness. Emunah, when it's talking about us coming from our side, it means faith. When it's coming from God's side, it means more steadfastness. And but it can also mean faith. You know, God gives us our soul back every day, right? You go to sleep, and the soul goes up to God. God cleanses it and sends it back down clean, or cleaner. You know, obviously, sleep doesn't get all the stresses out, but it comes back clean. That's why we wake up refreshed in the morning, if we get enough sleep. Once upon a time, I used to get enough sleep. It's been many years, but as I remember, when you get enough sleep, you wake up refreshed. But so yeah, and God's faithfully does that every day for our whole life until we get to get out of the confines of our body. And but it's also He has faith in us. He sends us back our souls refreshed, and says, "Here, you've got another day of life. Go do something with it. Do something good with it. You know, I have faith in you. I'm giving you the soul back so you can do something with it, and I'm sure you will." And you know, some days we do something great, and some days, you know, maybe we don't do something so great. But there's always the sense that you can come back to God. In the morning service. Then you wash your hands. First thing, you wash your hands, and you say a blessing. You thank, you bless God for having commanded us to wash our hands. I believe men and women both, because when you sleep, it's you get it's a kind of impurity. So sleep, the biggest source of impurity is death. A dead body is the most stringent form of ritual impurity. And sleep is a 60th part of death, they say. Sleep is kind of an attenuated form of death. It's pure inertia, right? Sleep state of consciousness, deep sleep state of consciousness, pure inertia. And so there's a kind of impurity, and that needs to be rinsed away. So you wash your hands, and then you say the blessing, Asher Yatzah. Bless you, God, King of the universe, who formed man with wisdom and created in him pipes and tubes, and I always think nerves and veins, and it's known, it's known and open before you that if even one of them should be opened up improperly or stopped up improperly, then it would be impossible for a person to stand before you. And blessed art thou who heals all flesh and does wonders. So the first thing, you get up, you thank God for returning your soul. You get ready for the new day. You wash your hands, clear yourself of impurity, and you acknowledge that the entire functioning of your physiology is little short of miraculous. My mother, Alaa Shalom, died of colon cancer, and she was not one to go running to the doctor every time something hurt. So by the time they figured out what it was, it had completely stopped up her colon. I mean, nothing got through, and it was a mess. And so they took out this huge tumor, and by that time it was metastasized. She succumbed, I don't know, some months later, 3 months after we got married. And but whenever I say that blessing, which is often, because you say that when you go to the bathroom too. So if you drink a lot, as you should, you tend to go to the bathroom a lot, and so you tend to wash your hands and say that blessing a lot. And every time I say it, I think of her, because it's absolutely true. It's a miracle that, just you've got how many miles of blood vessels and how many feet of intestines and the heart pumps and the diaphragm goes up and down, and all this stuff goes on that you don't even think about. You've got colonies of all kinds of symbiotic bacteria in all parts of your body. I mean, I just read an article about this in American Scientist. There's colonies of bacteria that perform all sorts of functions that the body cannot do without, and they're all over. I mean, they're all over in every different part of the body, and they're like these other. I know it makes you feel funny, but they're there for us. God put them there for us. They serve us, and we serve them. It's like it really kind of expands your boundaries. Who am I? Well, you're more than what you think you are, because all this stuff is going on inside. All right, so you do that. Then you get up and you say the morning service. Men are obligated to say the morning service, and preferably with a minyan. Men are obligated to put on talis and tefillin. Women are obligated to pray, but they don't have to come to the synagogue and be with the minyan, and they don't need to do talis and tefillin. and some rule that the right wing rules that not only don't they have to, but they shouldn't, that it's improper to do that. But not all Orthodox rabbis rule that way. And all of those things are, Tallis has the seats, right? You ever tie a string around your finger to remind you of something? I've never done it. That's what people used to do. But that's what the tzitzit are for. They remind you. It's in the third. It's in the third paragraph of the Shema. It says you should make these tzitzit and on tizkuru, so you should remember to do all God's commandments. Tzitzit has a gematria of 600, and there are 8 strings and 5 knots, so it comes out to 600. You add that all up, it's 613, which is the number of commandments. And that's, so all of this is to remind you that there's a God, and he expects us to behave in a certain way. Even though many of the commandments are not applicable to everybody. I mean, there's all the commandments for the Kohanim, right? And does anybody hear of Kohen? So those commandments are definitely not applicable to any of us. There are quite a number of commandments that are only applicable in the land of Israel, and a lot of those are actually only applicable when the majority of Jews live in their ancestral holdings, which is virtually impossible now because nobody knows what tribe they're from anymore. So there's 613 commandments, but the ones that are actually applicable, the Chafetz Chaim actually wrote a book, a little book where he outlined the commandments that are actually applicable nowadays in the diaspora, and there's like 275 or something like that.
It's a relief.
So yeah, it's plenty, but it's plenty. In the morning service, you say there's 15 blessings where you thank God for every step of you getting up. You thank God for opening your eyes. You thank God for one of the ones I like best, Roch ha'aretz al hamayim, which means he made the land firm on top of the water. And you say that actually when you swing your feet out of bed and put your feet on the ground. Nowadays you just say them all in the synagogue, but originally that's what that was. And it's like God made the material creation, right? The water, we know in virtually every tradition, the ocean is a metaphor for the transcendent. And God said, all right, let the waters be gathered into one place and let the dry land appear. And that, in other words, there's this crust now on top of the transcendent, and that crust is creation for all its different levels, but in particular the material creation in which we live. And God clothes the naked, so when you get dressed, you say that. And God girds Israel with strength. I think you say that when you put on your belt or something like that. Anyway, there's 15 of them. And then you have Psuke de Zimra, which is selections from Psalms, mostly from Psalms. And it just, praise God for nature. So we begin to see nature somebody wrong with the count? So we're talking about what if you don't know Hebrew and if you don't know Hebrew, then you can still pray. You can pray in English. It would be good to learn Hebrew. And I didn't grow up speaking Hebrew. I don't really speak it that well. I can read it okay now, at least rabbinic texts I can read. I don't know if I could read an Israeli newspaper, but rabbinic texts I can usually muddle my way through. But all it is practice. Of course, you need a start. You need to be able to read the letters and maybe have some sense of the grammar. And I got a little of that in Hebrew school when I was 50 plus years ago, and then I did spend 9 months in Israel, and I did take some time to actually just study Hebrew, but this is all kind of on my own. Everyone there, of course, wanted to speak English with me, and since Katie and Joseph didn't speak anything but English, I didn't really get much of a chance to practice Hebrew. And anyway, that was 30 years ago. Anyway, Hebrew is the language of Torah, and it says that God looked into the Torah and created based on that. So Torah is actually the blueprint of creation, and the rabbis tell us that the names of things in the Hebrew language are not arbitrary as they are in other languages, that they actually reflect the essence of whatever they refer to. And then this is derived from the first, I guess the second chapter of Genesis, where God brings Adam all the different animals, and it says, and whatever he called them, that's what they were. In other words, and it's not like his calling made them that, but he called them what they were. In other words, he saw, all the different qualities, and he was able to create the appropriate combination of sounds that captured the essence. So we're all familiar with that kind of tradition, and if you want to go into it in much more detail, look up on Amazon. I think it's called Torah and Veda. It's by Barbara Holdridge, who last I knew she was teaching out in, I think UCSD maybe.
Santa Barbara.
Santa Barbara? She was Santa Barbara.
And we're talking quite a bit about commandments, and so the idea of the transcendent commanding you or God commanding you, I just have always had trouble relating to that. It's easy for me to understand the idea of the transcendent, but the idea of a God commanding me to do something, I have trouble with that.
It's all for our own good, no, seriously, because the rabbis say, what difference does it make to God if you eat kosher or not? It doesn't make any difference to him. Anything I think it's in Job, when the last the three friends come and Job kind of blows them off, and then Elihu, I think, is the fourth one he comes, and he kind of puts Job in his place. He said, if you do good, what difference does it make to God? And if you screw up, what difference does what does it take away from God? It doesn't do anything. God is God. He's unchanging, and he's eternal, and he's infinite. He said, nothing. It's the sticks. It's like coming with the sticks. It doesn't make a difference, but it does make a difference to us, because if we, God gave us these commandments so that we should grow and fulfill our purpose. It's like this is our dharma. We were all born or became Jewish for a reason. We all got put into. Is anybody here a convert?
Hmm?
So you were put in the situation that you were in because this was your dharma, and when you accepted that dharma on yourself, all the rest of us didn't have any choice, unless you want to say that we had a choice what family we came down into. But so the Jew by birth, chose at one point, and the Jew by choice chose at another point, and they say we're all, of course, Jews by choice in our society because so many people choose to blow it off. But when you do that, you're fulfilling your dharma. I mean, that's why that's why you're here.
But it's
as
also,
opposed to
sort of
somewhere
a
else.
benchmark for society at large, because, there's the 7 Noahide laws
Mhm.
that apply to all mankind,
Mhm.
and there are just a few more that we have. So,
A lot more, 606 more.
right, but in terms of the 10 Commandments.
That's the gematria of Ruth,
Okay,
because she was a convert, so she took the extra 606 commandments.
Huh.
but the idea is that the 7 Noahide laws are there
Right.
as guidelines for society at large.
Well, yeah, they're the guidelines for basic humanity.
Right.
Don't eat the limb of a living animal. Don't blaspheme God. Don't worship idols. Don't engage in immoral sexual relations. Don't steal. Don't murder, and establish courts of justice. So, basic functioning of society and basic decency on the level of the individual.
Could there be, I was wondering about David's question, in terms of, were you thinking you have trouble visualizing a God that would command?
Yeah,
Like that?
the concept of, well, the old guy and this guy looking down at you, saying you did good, you did bad, judging.
Mhm, mhm.
I don't relate to that.
Could the translation of commandments
So mitzvah,
be different from mitzvah?
it has several meanings. So it means to command, with sub-focus to command. And so a mitzvah is a commandment, it's what we're supposed to do. And in terms of being judged, you can look at it as natural consequences. If you're in your dharma, then things go well, and if you're not in your dharma, then things don't go so well. Better is death, and because one can do it, better is death in one's own dharma than life in the dharma of another. I think it's from McGee. But it also means it also has a sense of a signpost, and signpost can mean two things. It can be pointing you in the right direction, like something that's mitsuyan, same root. Mitsuyan is special, pointed out. But a signpost can also mean can also mark a spot. You've arrived. In other words, it's like the cities. Cities are a means to the cities are a means to perfect yourself, but they're also a sign. If you're spontaneously performing mitzvahs, then that means you've reached a good level. And if you're not, then these are guidelines that will help you attain that level. But it doesn't. There's a lot about reward and punishment in Judaism, and I don't really relate to that very well. God is vindictive, and he sets you up because we're all human, we're all finite, we're all we all make mistakes, right? Fate is usually translated as sin. It means missing the mark. There's other words for more serious transgressions, but it's not a. It's like you wonder, did God set us up to fail? Did God set us up, with free will? So, God wanted us to have free will because it's only for exercising our free will and bringing ourselves to perfection that's what we're supposed to be doing. But along the way, we're gonna make mistakes. So, it's God like, oh, got him that time, It can't be that, It just can't be that. It's like whatever. Whenever we do something wrong and something negative comes back, the purpose is to correct it's a corrective, it's a reaction, which means correct, get back on the path. And But it has to be that way if we're gonna have free will. And free will is a great, great blessing, because if there's no free will, there's no reward at the end.
That gets back to my original question, which is, our purpose in life is to not correct the world, but to complete the world, and so in a sense we are, even though we can't necessarily identify as God, we identify with God, and we are His agents in this particular realm to carry out His commandments, David.
Heal.
So.
Yeah, it's called tikkun olam. If we're enlightened, then we'd be spontaneously 100% in our dharma, and we'd be fulfilling all the commandments that, and they wouldn't be commandments.
But you
they
can
just
still
be our
rejoice
nature.
in them. You can still rejoice.
Yeah.
That's right.
And
That's right.
now whether we would spontaneously go out and, at a certain point in the fall, gather up, these different 4 species, which, some of which don't grow here, and wave them in a certain way, that I don't know, it's like, maybe some things you gotta be told the details, and then, it feels very natural to do it. That took